Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, mole mole wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the crowded Mattress Studios here in the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville. We are so happy and so honored that you'll join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids, teachers, principals, and librarians. And also, please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guests today, Marie Weller and Paula Vertikoff. They're here to celebrate Cranium Critters. Before we invite our guests into the studio, we want to invite you to connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. We would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. While you're there, if you're an author, please be sure to click the Authors Click Here button and find out about our Certified Great Read program. This is an incredible program that can really help your book, well, can help the world know all about your book. You want to check it out. Go to readingwithyourkids.com and click on that Authors Click Here button. And, of course, while you're at readingwithyourkids.com, you can click on the Contact button up at the top of the page. Let us know what we're doing well. Let us know what we could be doing better. And let us know who you would like to hear on a future episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Join us right now from Columbus in the great state of Ohio. Our guests are here today to celebrate a really important book. It's called Cranium Critters. Please welcome to the show first, Paula Vertikoff. Paula, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having us.
I'm excited to have you on. Paula is a school principal. And so She is an expert in teaching and working with kids. And her co-author is Marie Weller. Marie, how are you?
I am terrific. So excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on. Marie, you are the counselor at Paula's school, am I right?
Yes. I'd like to say that Paula is the principal at my school.
Well, now we know we have a great team because obviously they love to tease each other a little bit. And they also respect the fact that, the kind of hierarchy that we like to put on things doesn't always line up with the real world. And it's always changing. So,
yep, that is for sure.
Why don't we start with Paula? Paula, tell us about Cranium Critters.
So Cranium Critters came out of a lot of different things, especially a little thing called COVID. I know. It started when we were shut down. Actually, Mrs. Weller, I always call her Mrs. Weller, did some lessons in her kitchen when we were shut down to continue SEL through the school. And from there, we got inspired to keep our community as one community. And we actually started in video broadcasting SEL lessons. We did some different presentations, and we continued to inspire, hopefully, other principals and school counselors to continue SEL. And that took us through hybrid and online times to really build our school community as one. And we were able to push out some of that video broadcasting not only to families. We really wanted to target families for SEL, and also in the classrooms for those students that were still coming back into the schools during that time. Yeah. And then from there, we really honed in on those brain awareness lessons. And I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. One of the lessons that I've done, that I did pre-COVID and then did through video, was teaching kids how their brains work. What I learned was that children really, really love learning about their brain and responded so well to that lesson. So we put our hands together and learned about how big our brain was. And I have a model of the brain that has, that's color coded and it has all the different parts. And they were, children as young as first and second grade were learning about their amygdalas and going home and saying, Mom, do you know what your amygdala is? And a lot of the parents didn't know, which was really cool to have a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old come home and say, hey, I know what an amygdala is. Would you like me to tell you what it does? So when we were learning about the brain, we learned about the two parts that we use most of the time at school. One being the amygdala, which is the emotion control center. And that acts like our guard dog or our safety pup. We call in Cranium Critters, Scout the safety pup represents the amygdala of your brain. And Scout's job is to keep you safe. So all day long, she's on the hunt for, sniffing out anything that could be dangerous or anything that could threaten your safety. And if she comes across something that she thinks is suspicious, she alerts you with her bark, and you get a feel in your body that, something is changing, and your body gets ready to either fight the danger or run away from the danger or freeze and wait for the danger to pass. So that was Scout. And then we also have our other cranium critter is Einstein, the wise owl. That's the head thinker and problem solver in your brain. And Einstein represents your prefrontal cortex. We talk about how he's the PFC, not the KFC, because the KFC is a chicken, but the PFC is an owl. And so his job is to help solve problems. But the problem is sometimes Scout gets mixed up and she barks when there's no real danger and scares Einstein. He flies away. Your PFC disengages for a while. And that's why people say and do dumb stuff when they get really upset, when they get angry, or when they get really anxious. And so Cranium Critters, Paws at the Paws Place, teaches children about their fight, flight, or freeze response and how to train the safety pup in their brain so that it can work well with their wise owl, their head thinker.
I think this is really fascinating, and what a great idea to help kids understand how their brain works. Because I'm sure both of you have experienced kids who are bright kids, but there's something going on, whether it's ADHD or dyslexia or some type of learning challenge that is preventing them from being the person, the learner that they could be. And instead of sitting down and saying, oh, this part of me doesn't work the same way it works for everybody else, what the kids, I think, see and tell themselves is, oh, I'm a dope. Mm-hmm. I can't do this. I'm a failure. And that just leads to more and more and more frustration.
Right. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we see this a lot with our students that have some anxiety or they worry a lot, that when they are in that state that they can't stop and think, and then that irrational thinking happens, and then all the what if happens. We see that a lot. Or students that are on the spectrum, where they start to perseverate and really think about things that they just need to kind of calm down, and they just need to use some of the strategies that hopefully their school counselors or principals have taught them, so they can think clearly, so that wise owls can fly back, and it can give them strategies to keep calm and think clearly.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think is important to just point out here, because you mentioned, hopefully the kids are learning from their counselors or from their principal. As somebody who has been doing educational magic shows for over 35 years across the country, which is why I drove through Columbus, from Cleveland to Cincinnati to do a couple of shows. Not every kid is in a school where number one, where there is a counselor, or if there is a counselor, it's one counselor for 800-900 kids. And there are a lot of, I am guessing, Paula, that you are the type of principal who knows everybody's name.
It's kind of the running joke. We go to places and I walk down the hall and I do try to memorize all their names. Right. Even if we go to if a visit, an author visit, I try to memorize all their names, because that is so important for us as adults to acknowledge that, acknowledge students and children that, they're important.
Well,
and we hear about them.
Well, I mentioned that because I shared with Paula and Marie beforehand. My wife retired from teaching, and she has taught with principals where, forget about the principal knowing every kid's name. Not every kid knew the principal's name. That's how disconnected it was. So your kids are very lucky that you have a principal and a guidance counselor first, and working together, getting along together, and you're working with kids on these strategies and presenting them. And you're not just waiting. You're not firefighters. You're not there putting out the social emotional fire that can happen in classrooms. You're actually giving kids the strategies. And I love the fact, one of the things that happened through COVID is that I don't think there are enough teachers, and it's not the teacher's fault. I don't think there are enough educators who realize that, I don't actually have to tear my hair out making sure the kids are sitting down in front of me when I'm on it. I can actually record something, and they can watch it. There's 3 kids fighting over one computer in a house, so I can record something and they can watch it when they get a chance. And wow, brain explodes. Right. It's, why didn't this message get out to everybody? But it didn't.
We had that conversation during COVID. How are we going to continue our teaching with the students in a meaningful way? And that was through videos. And we still put out weekly videos to our students that have one of Mrs. Weller's lesson in them, along with other things. And we really wanted that common thread of a message across the board, at our school. And we really wanted, us to be front and center to show that it is important. I always start off with an introduction, because they need to see that the leader of the school is the person that is putting stock in social emotional learning.
I just, I'd give you a standing ovation if I could stand, because I think that's so very important. I had an experience where before I began performing, I was working in human services, and I worked with kids in the juvenile justice system. And I remember there was this one particular girl, and I started working with her individually because she wanted to be prepared for a religious ceremony, and we shared a faith. And she was finding it very difficult to kind of memorize the different prayers that she had to memorize. And we sat down and we had a conversation about the fact it's like, you're not a dummy. You just, that part of your brain doesn't work the same way as mine does. So let's find a workaround. And it literally changed the kid's life. It changed how she perceived herself, to the point where when it was time for her to see if she was ready for this, religious milestone, the person quizzing her said, "I've never met anybody who was more prepared." And it was, she literally was able to make a life change, and it was wonderful. And so I'm really happy. I'm wondering, Marie, what's the response from parents who have their kids come home, their 6-year-olds, and say, "Hey, do you know what an amygdala is? I'm going to teach you all about it. I'm going to first teach the podcast host how to say it." Any parents coming back and saying, "My kid's making me feel like a dummy"?
Well, the parents, I think, are have really embraced this. It's great when it's fun because, so often, as your wife would know, and, all of us know as parents, that oftentimes when we say, "What'd you learn today?" They can say nothing. So when I'm in the classroom and I set this up and I say, okay, so now today when you go home and the grown-up in your house says, what'd you learn today? If you tell them that you know what your amygdala is, there's a good chance they are not going to know what you're talking about. And you're going to have to explain it to them. And, and so that's really cool. Now, the thing that we do with our videos, when we do these video broadcasts, because we continue to do that, we put out, it's about a 10-minute video, every week. And I do a lesson. We usually do a couple of segments, featuring kids in the school. And we send that out, or Paula pushes that out to parents as well. So everybody in the school is getting the common message, and there are no secrets of what Mrs. Weller is teaching. But it gives, it helps the parents learn too, because we didn't learn this stuff as kids. You know, we did not learn, I don't know that I ever heard the word anxiety growing up. I think that we talked about, being worried. In my house, it was, get yourself something to eat and you'll feel better, or stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. But there wasn't. Can you relate? But we didn't really learn good strategies for managing uncomfortable feelings. And so now we have all of these adults that don't know how to manage anxiety, and you can't teach what you don't know. Some of us have figured it out on our own. But there are a lot of, adults that they don't know. It's really hard to help. So I feel like both our videos and our Cranium Critters book help parents to know this is what's going on. This is normal. All emotions are good. And you can train the safety pup in your brain just like you can train a real puppy. And it takes a really, really long time. It's not something that, you don't take your puppy outside once and say, okay, go tinkle, or now you're all good now. That it's an ongoing process. And that's how it is when we're trying to learn how to regulate emotions. And what works for one child doesn't necessarily work for another child. So within our book, we have what we call a pause place. In schools, sometimes it's called a calming corner, but we call it pause place because there's a little play on words with pause and pause. And it's filled with a variety of different items that kids can use to practice calming. There's breathing strategies and some relaxation strategies, and we've got positive pup talk, some affirmations that you can use, because people are all different, and what works for one may not work for somebody else, and giving the kids the chance to sort of explore and play around with strategies and find out, oh, this feels good when I use it. This not so much, but, having that variety and that information for parents.
Yeah.
And the parents' response has been overwhelmingly, they watch our videos before they go to bed. It's like their snuggle time, and they learn. And the parents sometimes get a hold of me and are like, oh man, that friendship piece, I use that myself. And so they are not only listening to it with their child, or what we're hoping the book will do is the same thing, where it's not only inspiring the parent with their child, but also for them to reflect as well. There's a note to parent part of the book that talks about all these things. And it gives parents a leg to stand on, because if you don't know, like you said, if you don't know what to do, then you start worrying, or you might put those, it's kind of harder to enforce some things with your child, or to give them strategies. And then we get to the part where a lot of our students are now, where they don't want to feel uncomfortable. where they want to, maybe there's a test coming up, or there is a big project, or maybe a friendship's having a little bit of difficulty. And then I get a call from the parent saying, little Johnny's having a hard time. They're upset. Well, they're uncomfortable, and it's okay to feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And they have to live in that a little bit in order for them to learn and strategize how to kind of move out of that state, because as an adult, we all feel uncomfortable from time to time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things I want to bring up, Paula, and it seems like it should have been a duh, of course, but we hear a lot these days, and I know, and again, from my wife's experience and from my experience going around to different shows, schools and parents don't always have great communication. You know, and we hear, and I'm not going to ask you to comment on anything political, but we hear about schools that are like choosing, like, no, we're not going to talk about this with the parents at home. Absolutely not. And parents say, what do you mean? But I mean, for something like this, and for other issues, it just seems like why wouldn't you want to have that great communication with your parents? Why wouldn't you want to start communication with the parents on a positive note instead of the first time the principal talks with the parent, it's, hey, your kid's being a real jerk. Can you just talk a little bit about that and the value that you found building this relationship with the parents?
Absolutely. And when we were shut down, we decided that we really wanted to get back to our core values, being kind, respectful, responsible leaders. And everything we did had to do with that. And we not only wanted our students and teachers and parents, our whole community, to really feel that, understand it, at the very least, name those core values, but then also break it down into, what does that mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And that was a really good conversation to have with parents, and to show them that we're all together and this is what we stand for. And that has been a great communication piece, not only in the building, but outside the building as well. And we have parents that say, wow, I wasn't respectful to so-and-so the other day, Mrs. Vertikoff. They have those core values at home now, too, that they follow because they've heard it so many times. Their child talks about it. And that has really increased our communication across the board, and we're all speaking the same language. We have that common understanding because they watch the videos, too, that we're putting out. So everyone is in that same community of one.
That's really fantastic, and I want to applaud both of you for that, because it is so important. And I know myself, when my kids went to school, I made it a point to go and introduce myself to my kids' teachers the first day of school and let them know about us, let them know about this weird family. Oh, by the way, I'm a professional clown. You might see me with makeup one time. But, I mean, that to me was very important. And I didn't understand why I didn't have to stand in line to meet all of my kids' teachers. And I'm like, why aren't all the other parents doing the same thing? So I really applaud you for doing that. I think Cranium Critters is a fabulous idea and a great resource. Where can we go to find out more about the book, about the video, about how a school might implement this in their community?
Well, you can check out, we have a website, craniumkidsmedia.com. Our book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble,
Etsy, Walmart.com. We're trying to get it out there as much as possible, because what we've learned along the way is there are not very many resources that have a format with the animal piece that is in there.
Brain awareness.
For the brain awareness. And Mrs. Weller learned that through one of her Facebook groups. They were all like, I need something. I need to be teaching my kids how to be great thinkers, and, how their emotion goes into that. So that's one of our drives for the book, is there is a need for families, for teachers, for school counselors.
So, and it's Cranium Critters, Paws at the Paws Place. And that's available, like I said, on Amazon. We have We've got some Instagram. We've got a Cranium Kids Media. And then we also have cranium.critters are our two Instagram. And then we're also on Facebook.
Awesome. And I noticed on your website there's a button for coaching. Are you two available to help schools implement this?
Yes, we would love to.
Wonderful. What a fantastic idea. And I want to encourage everybody. And Paula, you can speak to this. You're a principal. I know one of the things that I used to, when parents come up to me and they say, oh, gee, I really wish my school would invite you to bring your magic show into my kid's school. And I always say to them, well, you can bring the information to your principal. They're open to ideas. They're so busy. They get tons of stuff. They don't have time to open everything. If you look at it and you think it's pretty good and you bring it to them, they're going to appreciate that. And if they don't, then they're a jerk. But can you just reinforce with me that, if a parent comes up to the principal and say, hey, look, I just heard this podcast. You want to take a listen to it? Check out this website. Are you agreeing with me that 90% of principals out there are going to say, thank you?
Absolutely. And I have a lot of principal friends, and they have all a copy of my book with our co-authors, and they wish they had a school counselor like we do. And it's just been an excellent learning experience. And I wish everyone would go through, finding a need, publishing a book, and, starting to coach people and really use what's out there as a resource.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for creating this. I want to thank you both for being here on the podcast. We've had a great time speaking to the creators of Cranium Critters, Marie Weller and Paula Vertikoff. My friends, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you again.
For having us.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and we hope that you will join us for the next episode. Until then, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guests, Marie Weller and Paula Vertikoff. Please be sure to check out Cranium Critters. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Will Cheever, Stephanie Davila, Cassandra Masonet, Jordan Saley. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.